the teleconference, and thanks a lot for making this work possible as well. So for sure, as you've heard, I worked in many missions with Nonviolent Peaceforce, and of course, each one of them is completely different from the other. But I think unarmed civilian protection, one of the main strengths is that we can adapt it to different contexts, and of course, North Dakota wasn't different. It was really challenging in the beginning because it's completely new ground for the organization working in the United States. And of course, there were issues of direct violence, but also in trying to work in environments of structural violence, related to marginalization, to racism, and to lack of opportunities of particularly the Native Americans that live in the area. So of course, when we went to North Dakota, our plan was to work with the communities of Mandan and Bismarck, and basically capacity building and trying to deal with any issue of violence that could happen. So what we did initially was just like to talk to everyone involved in the conflict. I think in total we spoke to more than 70 people in every side of the conflict, with every different perspective, including law enforcement, union workers, community leaders, religious leaders. Everyone who were related somehow to the conflict.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for your trust and the support that you give to Nonviolent Peaceforce. So, based on my experience in projects in South Sudan and in Sri Lanka, those were crucial to think about how to adapt unarmed civilian protection to the context in Bismarck, Mandan, and Standing Rock. So I think that experience has been crucial because it's been a learning experience to consider that the context is always unique in each place, and we should be responding to the needs in the context. So when we do that, we adjust our strategies and we try to maneuver somehow with the different strategies that unarmed civilian protection provides. So it has been crucial, the experience in previous projects, to come here to North Dakota and respond to the needs in the community.
And I'm back, so it's good to be on with everyone. And I'm wondering, Thiago and Martha, if you would share a little bit about some of the encounters you had in meeting with a variety of the sides to the conflict there.
Yeah, right. Well, when we arrived in North Dakota, that was the first step that we took. It was important to engage with different actors from different sides. So we included civil society members, active civilians in the community, religious leaders, authorities, including the mayor of Bismarck, the commissioner of Mandan, law enforcement as well. So we try to make sure we engage a variety of actors to try to understand the different narratives about the conflict in the camps. So it was really important as initial stage, just making sure that everybody knew who we were, what was the purpose of our presence, and also we used that to gather information and try to assess what were the opportunities and the gap that we could fill in the time that we were there.
Yeah, and I think in general, Mel, everyone was willing to talk to us. Of course, let's say, the side more of like law enforcement and union workers, the other side of the conflict, let's say, they were like really defensive in the beginning, but after we started to discuss one of the main principles of the organization, which is no partisanship and what's our role there, just to open this space for dialogue in the community. We're not there to protest, we're not there to take sides. I think they were really, really open and started to share their views, and it was really important for us as well to just understand different narratives and different perspectives perspectives, because we didn't, for example, knew in the beginning that the union workers, for example, they were really, really concerned and just like losing, their livelihoods. And I think a lot of people don't understand that in the beginning. So it's very important to put ourselves in other actors involved in the conflict as well.
Yeah, during this first stage, one of the first things that we realized was the capacity that people had. People in general, all these actors were really concerned about the situation and the polarization that the community was facing. And all of them, most of them, I think, were really concerned about the situation. And there was a lot of willingness, and people wanted to do something, right? There was capacity, there was resources, and that was something that we acknowledged right from the beginning, and we kept that in mind to build on that willingness, which is a way of making sure that there is a space for local ownership, primacy of local actors, for people to be their own agents of finding the solution to their own problems.
And finally, Mel, we were really glad that a lot of people saw this conflict as an opportunity as well. Just to address many underlying issues related, to racism, to marginalization, to historical grievances. So I think that the conflict related to the pipeline was also an opportunity to address those issues.
And so you found polarization, capacity, racism, some historical trauma. And how did you see that impacting this conflict?
Well, what is, each conflict has also a history. So what happened in this conflict was the exacerbation of some of the problems that the community has been facing, right? So there was a lot of also racism, and then this conflict was exacerbated that racism. So it was very, very clear that was growing.
And of course, a conflict has many layers, and we're not there to sort out the entire conflict. We need a holistic, multi-level approach to do that. It's not just our role. We're basically there to work with the people involved in that to try to find some solutions, But of course, we need to understand that the issue of the pipeline was just one of the layers of this very intricate conflict.
And how is this different or the same, really, of the work that you've done in South Sudan or Sri Lanka? You're two of the most experienced people in unarmed civilian protection in the world. What differences did you see between those locales in the way that you approached?
Yeah, right. I think one of the difference that was very clear at the beginning was a lot of that we were able to identify a lot of capacity, local capacity and local willingness for people to find their own solutions. So that was different in a sense that sometimes in other countries or other projects where we have been, it takes more time, to work and build that. But in North Dakota, it was clear that there was a huge potential for local leaders of different types, civilian leaders, religious leaders, to also be the promoters of solutions to that conflict.
Yeah, and Martha mentioned initially about local ownership and the importance of the primacy of local actors, and I think that's a commonality in every conflict. That you really need to involve people involved in the conflict in the decision-making process. We are not there, to impose any solution, or we were just there to work together with people, because otherwise it's not sustainable. So I think that's one of the main strengths of the organization and unarmed civilian protection, that we are there to try to find solutions together. And I think that's a commonality in each of the places we worked. People want to be involved.
And so describe some of the things that you did with these people who had capacity, who were interested and willing to deal with the longer-term issues. How did you deal with that?
Yeah, so basically, I mean, when we started to talk to a lot of people, they showed a lot of interest in joining trainings, in understanding more about the work of the organization, the work we've done in other places, and particularly on armed civilian protection. So we just carried out some training, some workshops. So the outcome of the first workshop, that was the decision of the own participants, was to create a couple of working groups. So the two most successful working groups that I would talk about, the first one initially was called an accompaniment group, but then it became some sort of like solidarity network, solidarity group, which basically was going to provide, and it provided accompaniment for people under threat, Native Americans, war protectors who were not feeling safe of going from the camps to Mandan and Bismarck. So, I mean, they needed to do that for many reasons, even going to court or purchasing something, or when they were like leaving the town and they were not feeling safe at all of going to the town. No? Besides rumor control, raising awareness, facilitating access to services. For example, there was a case of a Native American. I mean, he was beaten up at a gas station and he wasn't feeling comfortable of going to the hospital by himself. So, of course, someone of this group that knows someone at the hospital can just like call and just accompany this person to the hospital to facilitate access. The discussions in this group are that peace work and solidarity work, let's say, they are limitless. I mean, we need to be creative, and there are many opportunities for this kind of work. The second working group that came from this training was a group of people interested in providing and just initiating some space for dialogue in the community, not to try to convince the others to think like themselves, like pro-pipeline, against pipeline, and of course we cannot forget the current political situation, the polarization, which is really difficult in North Dakota, is not different, but basically just to try to find commonalities, that all the community is concerned about, and how you're going to live together after everything that they experience, because the conflict was really overwhelming. It's a very small community, and they were not used to deal with conflict, So this group, and we're really happy because there's a local organization called Dakota Resource Council. They are now spearheading these initiatives, So that's all we want, that a local organization just carry out the work. That's sustainable. That's a long-term approach, and that's our legacy. And other individuals who are also willing to join those initiatives. And the third group, Martha can talk a little bit about.
Yeah, the third group is a group of clergy from Bismarck and Mandan. So during this time there, we received a request from a religious leader of providing a training or a workshop for just clergy in Bismarck and the reservation. So after some consultations with her and with other clergy members, we were able to design an agenda together to have a workshop. It was a short time, because, the clergy is always quite busy, but it was just one morning, and what we did on that morning was, the first part, we used the opportunity, of course, to socialize and to share the experiences and the strategies that we have to promote protection of civilians, to do protection of civilians. And the second part of that morning was just a space for the clergy to discuss their own strategy and what is it that they can do together, because we have seen in other countries as well, and this is also the case, when religious leaders have a lot of influential power on people, and they can promote a lot of positive change in their communities. So it was a good chance for this clergy to share their own initiatives, and they agreed to create this working group and meet on a regular basis to promote different initiatives in their communities. So this third group, we have a lot of hope in them, and Thiago. Okay. We believe that all these three working groups is in this context was about addressing and responding to the needs of the Native Americans, but we believe that they have also the potential to respond to the needs of any minority in Bismarck, Mandan, and Standing Rock. So this is basically what we've done this time.
Yeah, and I think it's important, Mel, to highlight that, I mean, those groups, they are interdependent, I mean, they overlap. There are like people who are part of different groups, and what we've done, we're just like some events where all those groups can get together and just discuss a lot of things. So basically it's just like a network of people working towards peaceful coexistence, and I mean, they want to deal with those underlying issues in the community. So that's basically our legacy there, I would say.
Well, and I remember when we started, there were only 2 clergy who were willing to really speak up on this. And I remember one particular meeting with a religious leader where he told us he was afraid to talk about it in the church. So what's changed since then that's brought this coming together?
Yeah, that's actually a very good point. So through a lot of engagement, so we saw that there were, at the end, in this working group of clergy, there were more religious leaders involved and talking about possible solutions and initiatives for the community. So these clergy or these religious leaders who were initially very afraid of talking about it, they came to the training. They are now part of the working group, willing to talk about it. So that's a significant change in people's way of dealing with conflict, because nobody likes conflict. So people normally sometimes avoid or neglect the conflict. So that's something quite positive in that process.
No, and of course it's a bit difficult for some religious leaders where the congregation it's really divided. Just to touch on these subjects, like some churches institutionally they were divided as well. So for a long time it was a touchy subject. But I think now, after the camps were closed and things are normalizing more or less. I think the opportunities are just opening up as well. So I think that was one of the things as well. But yeah, we have at least like 15 religious leaders now that are really open and willing to participate and understand that they represent this moral authority, and being proactive in the community.
And you mentioned about when the camps were closed. And one of the things that we discovered right away was that there were conflicts within the camp. There were conflicts within the tribe and with the various other tribes that were there, as well as the white environmentalists. But finally, there was a major clearance that happened in February. Can you talk about what the community protection team, what their role was during that clearance?
Yes, you're right. The dynamics at the camp, they were a bit difficult. There were a lot of divisions, and of course, it's not our role. We tried to really, be inclusive, representative, and talk to everyone, and not be part of this dynamics, this power dynamics. Our main focus, of course, was, to work with the community Mandan in Bismarck to provide those accompaniments and those services. But of course, we went to the camp many times. We spoke to everyone there and building relationships and understanding better the context. And after the formation of these working groups, we were really happy that, I would say that the first really demanding activity and response that they've made was on the 22nd of February, like the day of the evacuation, that they got together, they developed standing operation procedures and contingency plans, and they planned themselves. So this group divided themselves. So some people would go to the checkpoints close to the camp to make sure there was no violence and not denial of services and rights to the people trying to come out from this area. The second group, they would stay in some places in Bismarck where water protectors might go because there were more than 200 on school buses, leaving the camp. And the third group, they even rented a room in one of the hotels where water protection would stay, just to make sure there was no incidents there. And they spoke to workers at the reception, and they were there, and they provided food, and in case they needed emergency shelter, they would respond as well. We had already houses ready to host people who might not feel safe to stay in other places. So they really, really responded to this emergency, and we were really happy about that.
And I remember an early meeting we had with the mayor of Bismarck, where, among other things, he told us during the meeting that he was carrying a gun at that very moment, and said things like, those protesters are lucky they don't get shot in the face when they terrorize my citizens. Tell us about what happened with the mayor.
Well, we after different meetings with the mayor, it was a really positive change because recently the mayor did a proclamation in Bismarck and Mandan to dedicate 1 week for the topic of nonviolence. So the fact that the mayor is talking about nonviolence and promoting nonviolence in Bismarck, doing this proclamation and giving the opportunity for people to think about nonviolence as a strategy, I think is a significant change on his approach to conflicts. So
yeah, and we had a couple of meetings with the mayor, and we went out for dinner. I would say it's an overstatement that suddenly he became nonviolent just because of us. But of course, Mel, I truly believe that the presence of an international organization with projects all over the world carries some weight. And that's one of the main things of NP. We influence decision-making process. Relevant people in the community, and I think, of course, our presence there contributed somehow. For people being willing to just work towards peaceful coexistence.
And I think it is significant that this was someone who was promoting the line that these water protectors were all paid, that they didn't give a crap about North Dakota, and that they would leave soon and go on to their next paid protest. And that was his attitude at first, and now he's declaring a season of nonviolence. So I do see that as significant. While we're on the subject of surprises, what else surprised you about this work?
A big surprise, I really would like to highlight that is, the capacity of people. That's something that should be acknowledged. The response of this protection team in the 22nd for provide services and protection to water protectors is a clear sign that the community has a lot of capacity, and the fact that they were able to organize themselves and to make sure that those water protectors who were coming to Bismarck had access to services and they were ready to provide accompaniment to them if requested is a clear sign that people, civil society in general, can also design and promote protection to members of their own community. So I really think is capacity, and then for us as Nonviolent Peaceforce is a huge lesson learned, to try to think also on what are the capacities of community, but not just their needs, and build on those in that capacity, build on the willingness and sincere interest for people to promote peace and justice in their own communities.
And how about you, Thiago? What surprised you?
I think, it was really important for the organization as well. I truly believe, that an armed civilian protection, It's a very powerful and effective methodology that the organization uses. It's a huge contribution for the organization to be spearheading this process, and I think we've learned a lot working in North Dakota. I mean, you better than no one knows the organization wants to expand and start working in different contexts like urban violence, like in my country, Brazil, or natural disasters. We're working now with refugee crisis, so I think we need to adapt to those different challenges. And because, like in North Dakota, international presence doesn't have this leverage, doesn't serve as this deterrence factor as in other places that we work. No, I mean, we realize that working with the communities, like the local community, because they develop relationships with potential perpetrators. No, they go to the same churches. I mean, their children go to the same school together, so they have these relationships. And potential perpetrators, they don't want to look bad. They don't want to look violent. They don't want to look racist. So that's the deterrence factor. And I think we learned a lot, and I think we start to understand better a model to be applied in similar contexts. Of course, giving room for adaptation to each different place. Every community looks different. But I think, the organization, I think, learned a lot as well, and it's going to help us to have a much more inclusive and representative approach in other places.
And so you mentioned model. How might this work provide a basis for a model for dealing with other violent conflicts in the United States, or, as you mentioned, in your home country of Brazil, that aren't the typical types of large-scale violence, large-scale intensive violence that we've been involved with?
Yeah, I mean, once again, I think it's we can think about a model, like, for example, capacity building. That's really, really important. But of course, we need to adapt that to different contexts. And I think the organization is very well positioned to do that, especially because, as we discussed initially, one of our main principles is local ownership. Is the primacy of local actors. Because, I mean, we are not going there to give any solution, but we are there to just discuss and open space for the local community to find their solutions themselves, because otherwise it's not sustainable. But I truly think that, and once again, it's a multi-level approach. It's not just our presence there that will deal with issues, that will just sort out issues of racism and all of that. It's a long-term approach. It's a work that it's really, really time-consuming. But I think there are many, many activities, and like those solidarity groups, for example, that can just deal, as Martha said, it's not just about Native Americans and water protectors, but vulnerable communities like immigrants, for example, is a very sensitive timing now. And I think those groups are willing and open to deal with those issues, no?
Mel?
Yes.
It's Gilda. I just think that maybe this should be the last question, so
all right.
We can also give folks some time for questions and answers.
And this will be a quick one.
Okay.
Thiago, you neglected one thing that I saw that I thought rather shocked you. And that was your last posting was in South Sudan, where it typically would be 100 degrees Fahrenheit. And so how did you adapt to the blizzards that you endured?
I think I did it, but I mean, you have to, Mel, of course. And I came from Rio, and straight from Rio, and it was the beginning of the summer there. So suddenly we get to North Dakota, and it's like -30, and it was really, really difficult. Initially I thought, oh my goodness, I cannot make it. But I mean, we are adaptable, no? And after a while we got used, and I mean, we were like well prepared as well. But it is a really harsh environment, I mean, like the lack of sunlight, I think, really, really affected me after a while. But I mean, after a while, I think both Martha and I we got used.